So I have realized that one of the watches that I wear but have not shown, not done a box opening as such on the channel, is my Chrono 41. So I thought I'd do that this morning. So why not do it in the beautiful sunlight of a beautiful summer's Friday morning. So there it is. I'll put it back in the box. It's a full set, so still has the little polystyrene wrapping sheet. Then you have the main box inside. And when I first got this, I never realized, but the bottom half of the box is actually wood. You see the wood grain there, which is quite neat. You've got the shield on the top there. And there's the watch in all its glory. In the Tudor boxes, you have this little section here, which you can keep your hang tag, your extra links and stuff like that once you've sized the bracelet. And underneath the watch you have a little pull thing, and you have your booklet and the actual all-important card itself, which has your registration on it, your serial number, date of purchase, etc., which gives you your 5-year guarantee. The 5-year guarantee with Tudor, the times have changed somewhat, whereas previously, you got a guarantee it was to you. And I suppose if you sold the watch, then you'd have to notify them, and whoever bought it then would have to register and enjoy the benefit of the rest of the guarantee. Nowadays with Tudor, and I think a lot of the other companies, if not all, the guarantee is there for whoever owns the watch. You don't have to register it, you don't have to let them know that you've sold it or anything like that. Whoever owns the watch within 5 years of its manufacture has the benefit of the guarantee. So this is the reverse Panda, as you can see. I'll be perfectly honest with you, I haven't the foggiest idea how to use a tachymeter. I have looked it up in the past, and whilst reading it, knew how to do it, but it didn't stay in my mind. I think the vast majority of people wouldn't either. It's a look. The Daytona is a very good example of that. It's obviously a very sought after watch, and probably the vast majority of people who wear a Daytona also wouldn't know how to use a tachymeter. But still, it's a feature of the watch. It's a look, a certain look. And what you have with the Tudor Chrono 41 is Tudor's version of the Daytona, I guess. So Tudor, as we know, is owned by the same company as Rolex, the Hans Wilsdorf. What's it called? Hans Wilsdorf Corporation, maybe? I can't remember. But essentially owned by the same company. So for a long time in history, Tudors were essentially made up of the parts bin of Rolex. So you could buy a Tudor Submariner. The case back would have Rolex on it. The bracelet clasp would have Rolex stamped on it. The crown would have a Rolex crown on it. A Rolex, the crown, the Rolex emblem. So they basically raided the parts bin at Rolex to put together a watch. The main difference was that Hans Wilsdorf wanted that the average working person could afford one of his watches. Essentially, he wanted to cover the market, let's be honest. So whilst Rolex was more upper tier, he wanted something a little bit lower. So that's how Tudor was founded in 1926, hence the Tudor 1926 model, a range of watches. And this year, the Monarch is a celebration of that. 2026, it's 100 years. So the Monarch is something of I'm not sure if it's an official limited edition or if it's released to commemorate those 100 years. I'm not sure if it's limited though. I mean, it will be at some point. Once they stop making it, then that'll be the end of it. But I don't think they're numbered. I might be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think they're a numbered limited edition. But in any event, obviously at some point, the Tudor became its own thing, and even though it's owned by the same corporation, it's nowadays certainly it's its own thing. However, what I feel is certainly if you look at some of the features, so if you look at the bracelet looks essentially like an oyster bracelet, but they've clamped on the ends these faux rivets, which is essentially, if you have a look, you can see, if I get you out of the shadow, there's like a little plate on the sides of each link with a rivet on it, which makes it look like it's been riveted on, but it's actually false. It's just it's a cosmetic thing. And it wouldn't surprise me if the bracelets are pretty much oyster bracelets, and they've put those on just to give it a different look, perhaps to, dare I say, cheapen it somewhat, make it not as pure, not a pure Rolex looking type of bracelet. They have now started using their own Jubilee bracelet, which is very nice. It's good to see, and I think the more we go down the line, I mean, the Black Bay line obviously was a complete departure and an extremely successful line for Tudor. So I think nowadays you can certainly view, in the same way as you've got these big brands like Richemont and these kind of, and the Swatch Group, where they've got loads of brands under their umbrella. Each brand is allowed its own identity and maintains it. Yes, they will raid each other's part bins. You've got that with Tudor, which has the Kinesi version of Etta, for instance. So Etta is owned by, I think it's owned by the Swatch Group. So the brands within it, like Longines, will use Etta movements. So, for instance, the new Hydro Conquest, which we've been talking about, I forget what it's called, L8888 or something, L888 point something, point 1, point 2. I'm not a big expert on movements. I've said that before. But that's an Etta movement. It's made specifically for Longines. None of the other brands use it, but it is made by Etta. So I suppose some people argue that it's an in-house movement simply because it's made specifically for Etta and it's made by the company that owns Longines, so therefore they're calling it an in-house movement. The same is true for Tudor. The Tudors now, if it has a manufacturer, if on the case back it says manufacturer on it, then it will be an in-house movement. But again, it's made by Kinesi, which is a company owned by the Hans Willdorf Foundation. That's the word I was looking for. And so you would say that it's an in-house movement, but it's actually made by Kinesi. Kinesi doesn't just make movements for Tudor, it makes movements for other watch companies as well. But you can call it an in-house technically because it's all under the same umbrella. Now, in terms of this particular watch itself, it does have vintage vibes, intentionally. It's a chunk of a watch. Let's take it off. You look at those sides. That is a chunk of metal. That is a real chunk of metal. You can see the lugs go straight down there, which does help to create a comfortable experience. I haven't yet got this quite right in terms of sizing, which is I've kind of been debating whether to upgrade the bracelet to the Jubilee or even to get an aftermarket Jubilee bracelet, because I'm struggling to make this one fit in a perfect kind of way. So it's pretty loose. So being loose means that the head, because it's such a heavy head, it means that it is top heavy and it does wiggle around quite a lot. So it does need a better fit. I've not traditionally been a chrono guy, but in this particular guise, it does make the watch very attractive. I prefer definitely the reverse Panda, which this is. The white with the black subdial for me would be a little bit too hard to tell the time. because the hands with the lume fill would be absorbed into all that whiteness. People do argue that with this one, the hour hand, when it's over one of the subdials, you can't actually use a subdial, and that's a fair point. But the amount of times that you're using the stopwatch, it really kind of negates that problem. It's not really a major issue, unless you're a regular user of the stopwatch, which I'm not. I'm actually much more of a diver bezel guy. So I utilize the timing bezels on diver watches all the time. They're very useful to me. And the decision to buy this one was purely from a looks point of view. And it just has a look, you know, it has that sort of, some watches, they've got chronograph subdials and they just look too busy. Somehow this pulls it off. And the Daytona, for instance, which is even smaller than this is 41 point something in diameter. I think the Daytona is 40, might be wrong, but I think it's 40. Yet it still manages to pull off the illusion of space on the dial. I suppose the subdials are smaller than this. But I certainly feel that this is a big, heavy watch. And I have given consideration to the possibility of working some kind of deal with somebody for a Pelagos, because I utilize diving bezels much more. But at the same time, I quite like the idea of still having a Chrono in my collection, small as it is. I don't have a big collection. I have watches that I've accumulated over the years, but I don't consider those to be part of my collection. Those are just watches which, as you go through life, you buy a watch, it either scratches up a lot, or maybe the crystal cracks, or the battery goes, you know. I've got a lot of quartz watches which I've bought over the years until I really sort of got more serious about my watches a couple of years ago, like I explained yesterday in my video, when I started to buy pretty much only mechanical watches. So at that point, I would say that the watches I bought from that point onwards, I would say were bought more as a collector than just somebody wearing a watch. Up to that point, there were times when I had nice watches, but it was just a single watch. So there were times when I had tags. I had several Acca races over the past 20 odd years or so, but it was a single watch which I wore every single day. I've got a Tissot Quadrato, which is a square dialed Tissot. That's actually quartz. It's a beautiful watch. It still works. It's in a cupboard in its box, and you know, it could be that at some point in time it'll be worth money. I never bought it at the time for its value. I just liked the look of the watch, and I wore it every single day. As I say, it's only until I replaced it with something else. You know, when I bought my Seiko King Turtle, I wore it every single day. Now, I've kind of gotten rid of all of the 4R movement Seikos that I've had, except for that one, because that one, at the time when I bought it, it was on sale. I bought it at a very, very good price, and even if I were to sell it now, it just doesn't make sense for me to sell it. The amount that I would get for it, I might as well hold on to it. And it kind of is the first watch really into my current era as a collector. That was I bought it about 3-4 years ago, and that was kind of a precursor to me getting really interested in collecting watches. So it has its place. I'm not sentimental usually about physical things really, but that one, I guess, has some meaning as a first watch in my current era as a collector. So even though chronographs is not really my thing, but I think it has its place in the collection. My collection is not all one brand. It was mostly Seiko till fairly recently, but since then, as I say, I've got a couple of Tudors now. I've got the 1926, I've got this Chrono 41, possibly will have a Pelagos at some point. So that's the only, anyway, the King Turtle is the only 4-hour movement. I've got the rest of my Seikos are all 6-hour. So currently in my Seiko lineup, I've got the Presage Classic Sensation. I've had a couple of the Presage Cocktail Hour, but I've since sold those. Those are 4-hour movements. So I've got the Presage Classic Sensation. That's a 6-hour movement. I have the Alpinist Mystic Forest, which is a boutique edition from Seiko. That has a 6-hour movement. It's a lovely watch. I have the SPB 509J1, which is a limited edition 60th anniversary, I think, or 65th. I forget. There's so many anniversaries they've got, Seiko. And that's the one with the wave dial on it. It's a really stunning watch, ceramic bezel. And it also has the on-the-fly adjustment. It's one of the first models to have it. That's also a 6-hour movement. And I'm also currently looking at another limited edition Seiko, or another Save the Ocean limited edition. And that's also with a 6-hour movement. That also has on-the-fly adjustment. I'm negotiating at the moment. I'm not sure if I'm going to buy it or not. We'll see. Depends if I can get it for the right price. So that's the situation at the moment in terms of the other watches. But coming back to this watch, which is what this video is supposed to be about. As I say, I'm not a big expert on movements. I can certainly say that some movements, in my experience, are better than others in the collection that I've got. And I know this is a Breitling movement. And although I don't have a timing graph thing machine, as I say, I've never really been into that kind of detail. For me, it's been about the watch overall. But I will say this keeps time fantastically well. From what I can tell, it doesn't lose any time. It doesn't gain and it doesn't lose. With my Seikos, if it goes in my watch winder and I'll come back to it a week later, I'll have to adjust it, usually by a minute or two. Either of my Breitlings, whether it's what you'd call an in-house movement, or which this isn't, it's a Breitling, or the 1926, which is, I'm not sure if it might be a Solita, I'm not sure what the 1926 movement is. They keep fantastic time. The bracelet on this is very good quality. It's obviously solid links, solid end link too. I would say that the clasps on the Tudor watches are some of the best in the business. I had a Rolex Datejust for about a week and a half recently, and I would say that this is on par. The Datejust clasp is a brilliant clasp. The way that the clasp sort of lifts at the end and you open the clasp, it's a very, very well implemented clasp. But this one too, what I like about the Tudors is how silky smooth they are. So if you have a look at them, you'll see on the friction points you've got these ceramic ball bearings, and there's just on this spot here, there's 4, 2 on the outside, 2 on the inside, and that means that the clasp has such a smooth action. You don't have this massive clunk when you close it, but you still feel very reassured. And the outside one is what holds the secure this bit in place, and it does so very, very well. Even though it feels like it's really soft, and it feels like maybe it's going to open up, but it doesn't. Those ball bearings hold it all in place very, very securely. There's 3 micro adjusts here, but if you have the Jubilee, then that's superseded now with the new T-Fit clasp. The T-Fit clasp, which gives you on-the-fly adjustment, and that's really where I'm at. Where I'm strongly considering upgrading this by putting on the Jubilee bracelet. It also upgrades the way it looks. It gives it a little bit more of a little bit more kudos, I think, a little bit more dressy. Even though this is quite clearly a tool watch, it's a beast as far as I'm concerned. Even though officially it's somewhat smaller than my Seiko Save the Ocean, which is 42mm, but Seikos are well known for conforming to the shape of your wrist very, very well. They do that better than so many other brands, Tudor included. The Seiko is more comfortable, even though it's bigger. I'm not sure if it's heavier than this, but it's going to be a similar weight to this. This is almost at, must be about 180 grams, 190 grams, something like that. And I think the Save the Ocean is something similar. But nevertheless, when you put it on, there's a certain reassurance that you feel when you put on a heavy watch. You know, I would say that Breitling users of old, maybe not now, the watches have come down a little bit in size, some of them. But you know, if people had a Breitling 10 years ago, you knew you were wearing a Breitling. You had a chunk of metal on your wrist. Never mind the regular Breitlings. Imagine people who had the Bentley Breitlings. You're talking about 50 mil watches, you know, really big watches, real big chunks of metal. And people like that. People like that feeling of having something heavy on the wrist. And up until very recently, I was one of those people. I enjoyed, I previously had a Seiko Diver, a kinetic one. I don't remember the model number. It was a beast. It was a huge watch. It was probably a 44 mil, 43 or 44, something like that. But the head weighed an absolute ton. I wore that watch pretty much to death. I wore it probably for 3 or 4 years until the kinetic capacitor gave out, essentially. And I could have got it repaired and had the capacitor replaced. This was, again, before I considered myself to be something of a collector. So again, it was a watch which I bought. I just wore it every single day. That was my watch, my daily driver. And there was no consideration to wearing anything else. So I went through life buying lots of different watches over a period of time, but it was always that single watch. So when I'd got, for whatever reason, I fancied something else, the next watch was my watch, and that's the only watch that I wore, and the others were just consigned to a drawer. Sometimes I would sell them if I was lucky enough to still have some value in the watch. And in fact, that kinetic diver I did sell as a non-charging watch. It didn't charge. It worked. If you wound it, it worked, but it wouldn't hold the charge. And I think because I had bought it well, I bought it on eBay as a new other, so it was in brand new condition when I bought it. I paid something like £200 or £300 at the time, and I think I still got close to £200 when I sold it as parts and repair, which was pretty amazing. And I think that's because they're relatively easy repair if you can be bothered to get it dealt with, changing the capacitor, and you had a lot of watch for your money on it. This is that kind of thing. You have, obviously it's a Tudor, so it's way above the Seikos of those days, but that was a big chunk of watch, which this is too. There is a company, Uncle Straps, that does half links for these. I might do that and not bother with the Jubilee, but I think for this to retain a place in my collection that I'm going to sort of look forward to wearing it, enjoy wearing it, I think I need to get that changed to a Jubilee bracelet. But before I do that, I just need to decide if I'm keeping it at all, or whether I'm going to change it for a Pelagos. I can't really afford to have both. And what's holding me back is simply because I have dive watches. I may pick up another Seiko dive watch. They're kind of affordable, let's say. So it'd be a shame not to have at least one Chrono of good quality in the collection, even if it's not my absolute preferred style of watch. But when I don't wear this for a while and then I put it on, I actually do feel really good. It does have that vintage vibe. You can see the boxed sapphire crystal, which certainly helps to give it that vibe. The tachymeter on the outside is an aluminium bezel, or aluminum as you might call it across the pond. That also adds to the vintage aspect of it. Besides for the Pelagos, I think all of the Tudors are aluminium. I think all the Black Bays are aluminium. And that's definitely intentional, not only for the vintage look, but also because they don't want it to get too close to Rolex. Obviously the Submariner is ceramic these days, the bezel. So to offer a Tudor Black Bay with ceramic bezel, I think will take away too many customers from the Submariner. And aluminium certainly does have a vintage look, no question about that. Black Bays haven't really called to me in a very big way, although this is officially a Black Bay, but it's really different. It's a Chrono. They've still given it the name Black Bay, I think, just purely to milk that success that the Black Bay line has had. The DNA of this watch is somewhat different to the regular Black Bays. The regular Black Bays, different sizes, but they've all pretty much got the same DNA. This one is somewhat different. Yeah, so that's pretty much my Tudor Chrono 41. I don't know what else there is I can say about it, other than it is a very, very well made watch. The only consideration is if you want to have a real hunk of metal on your watch, or on your wrist. It's a big watch, it's a heavy watch, it's a hefty watch. And if you enjoy that kind of thing, then I would heartily recommend it. If you're not so much into that, but you want to get a Tudor, go Black Bay, or if you want to get something with a ceramic bezel, consider the Pelagos. The Pelagos is an out-and-out diver, designed to be worn as a dive watch, not just cosmetic. It's made to be a successful dive watch, to be relied upon as a diver. Even though I wouldn't normally go out of my way to buy a 42mm watch, the Pelagos is 43. Well, at least the Ultra is 43. They've made it bigger, which I was very surprised. I would have thought they'd have made it smaller. They have brought out a 39mm, which, if that would have a date on it, I would very, very strongly consider that. I do like to have a date on my watches. So it would probably be the 42, the regular 42. And I quite like the idea of a left-hand drive Pelagos, but I'd probably have to try them on in the store and see the difference. But the 42mm, even though I wouldn't necessarily go for 42mm nowadays, but because it's titanium, I think that would be fine. The weight of it would be quite a lot less than this, so I think that would be fine. If there was a way that I could find myself getting a Pelagos without having to sell this, that would obviously be a very fortunate position to be in. I'm not in that position currently, but if I was, that would be very fortunate. It would be a big luxury for me to have both a Pelagos and a Chrono 41. I had given consideration to selling the limited edition Seiko, the 509J1, but I kind of flit in between the idea of selling it and not selling it. It's a limited edition. It's currently over its retail price, which is quite unusual for a Seiko. So if you try and find these on eBay, the 509J1, you're looking at paying a couple of grand, whereas when it was available retail, it was around 1,600 here in the UK. But they're quite difficult to source nowadays. There is one or two on eBay. There are a bunch available from Japan, but you're going to pay an extra £200-300 on customs and excise, import duties, etc. So, and with Japan, in my experience, I have imported a couple of watches from Japan, and in my experience, both watches, both were Seiko, both watches that I imported from Japan and paid the taxes. I did that knowing that the price still made sense. It was still a lot cheaper than buying it retail here, but both watches had cosmetic issues. They were new, but for me, they had cosmetic issues which really warranted them being seconds. And I think that when companies like that, are able to sell it at the price that they sell it, they are really buying up. I don't know this for a fact. I'm just making an assumption that a lot of these companies are buying up these kind of seconds watches and then selling them off as new and hoping that you're not going to bother sending it back to Japan. And the one that I bought, I wasn't prepared to do that. I said I'll send it back, or you give me a significant reduction. There was a couple of issues with the watch, real issues, not issues that you would be able to see as a spectator, so to speak, but you yourself would know about it after wearing it for a few days. And I was able to secure a fairly reasonable reduction. I think I got another 80 or 100 pounds off the price, so it certainly made it worthwhile, rather than sending it back. But I do say that if you're in the UK, I'm not sure how it works with America, what duties you pay, but here in the UK, there's no getting away with it, because the people that send watches from Japan, especially if you're getting, one of the advantages of buying stuff from Japan is that you can get JDM watches, which is the Japanese domestic market. So the vast majority of Seiko watches are made for Japan. The 509J1, that limited edition that I'm talking about, is a limited run of 6,000 watches. 6,000 doesn't sound that limited, but if you think about Seiko, how many countries in the world sell Seiko watches? It's actually a very small run, 6,000. If you think about it, that probably 70 or 80% of that limited run stays in Japan, and the rest of the world shares maybe 20%, then it's an even smaller run. So if you go on Chrono 24, you'll always see lots of Japanese companies selling watches which you can't get here. And a lot of the JDM versions or releases by Seiko are really, really nice, and you can't get them here. So it's really nice to be able to get a watch which you're unlikely to see anybody else in your country having. You might, but it's less likely. So for some people, it's worth paying those taxes to have that nice watch. But my experience has been that both times that I've done that the watches have had issues. Not enough to send them back, but enough for me to be not entirely satisfied with the whole process. So that's something to bear in mind if you're considering that. Yeah, so that's really where I'm at the moment with my Tudors, and I would say that I'm still a committed Seiko fan. I am. There's something about the way they're made, there's something about the style, the way they fit on the wrist that just speaks to me. It just works. I also like the fact that I can wear a Seiko and it just be a Seiko, so I don't have to worry about the watch that I've got on my wrist that somebody's gonna try and whip it off my wrist. I went with my family, we went bowling yesterday, and I was conscious of the lane next to me, one of the guys on the lane next to us, looking at my watch on a fairly regular basis. I wasn't worried because we were all together in a big group, and it could well be he was just admiring it. He was just, wanted to see the watch. He just liked the look of it, and I'm sure he had no nefarious intentions. But sometimes you do feel a bit self-conscious when you're wearing an expensive watch. So it's one of the reasons why in the end I didn't keep that Rolex, because I think it would have just worried me too much. I wouldn't rule out getting another Rolex at some point. I can't see myself buying one, they're just too much money, but if somebody were to say, here, Simon, here's a Rolex gift, would I take it? Absolutely. I would love to own a Rolex. Absolutely love to own it. Even if it was a vintage or current, it makes no difference. Having a Rolex has a certain kudos to it. So there's no question that I would want to own one, but would I make that outlay again? It's a lot of money. My son keeps saying to me, he sees the watches that I've got in my collection, and he said, if you would have not bought those, you could easily have bought a Submariner. Easily, and he's right. The prices that I've paid for my watches, combine them, I could easily have bought a Submariner, or pretty much any Rolex really. Not precious metal one, but any Datejust, any regular Datejust or Submariner. But the point is, instead of having that one watch, I have 7 or 8 watches which I really enjoy wearing, and I don't feel self-conscious going out on the street wearing them. And for me, that has value. But like I say, would I love to own one? Absolutely, I'd love to own a Rolex. I'm not one of these people that, because I don't have a Rolex, that I'm going to beat up on Rolex wearers. I'm not like that. I fully respect the kudos and the quality of Rolex, Do I like the way Rolex behaves? No. Most people would say the same. They don't like the way Rolex behaves. Their whole model of how they release watches. I don't know how long that will last. If it will get even harder, I don't know. I don't think anybody really knows. Rolex has their own way of doing things, and the wheels at Rolex turn pretty slowly, I think. But anywho, that's the Chrono 41. Have a great day, folks. I'll catch you on the next one.